Batista with the catch! That's how I got to start it off. Welcome into Chatterbox Bearcats, everyone. It's not March. In fact, it's September 26th, smack down in the middle of football season. But Chatterbox Bearcats is here to tell you today that the Cincinnati Bearcats' full basketball schedule has been revealed, and I am not making this up. I am not stretching the truth. It is the greatest basketball schedule, the hardest, the most significant, the coolest programs that we've ever seen on one schedule. Nick Niehaus joins me today. Chatterbox Bearcats. We are free and available wherever you get your audio podcasts. Take us on the go. And also, sit down, have a drink, stay with us for a little while on YouTube at Chatterbox Bearcats and at Chatterbox Sports for the live shows. Nick Niehaus, I'm not wrong by saying that's the greatest schedule we've ever seen. Welcome.
Yeah, talk about fun. I mean, this is going to be the most fun season I think I've ever witnessed as a Bearcat fan in my life. Not only is the schedule good, but the team is good, which just makes the schedule even more fun. So I'm excited. I'm ready to break it down with you. It's going to be a good time.
So the schedule looks as such, and God, we had to wait a while for it. It starts with Ohio State. That's on Friday, October 18th. That is in Fifth Third Arena. It's a game that doesn't matter, but it's one that, for God's sakes, just beat Ohio State. Just please come out of the gates and play like it's a real game. Know your subs. Beat Ohio State because they came in the inaugural night of the new Fifth Third Arena and they just picked apart Cincinnati. And a game where when Jaron Cumberland wasn't on the floor with foul trouble, UC was helpless. They couldn't do anything. They were stumbling all over the place. But it's Ohio State for the exhibition. Then we have, I call it poopy portion. It's the poopy portion. It's the cupcakes. It's the games that everyone has. It's Arkansas Pine Bluff. It's Morehead State, who's been a tournament team multiple times in recent years. They could, you don't want to go sleeping on November 8th. You got to take care of business against Morehead. Then it's Nichols. Then it's at Northern Kentucky, since he lost there last time. At Georgia Tech versus Alabama State before the schedule really begins to pick up. Is there anything, as we do the schedule watch, the predictions that don't matter, is there anything through those first 6 games that scare you?
Well, you said the game against Ohio State doesn't matter, and on paper, it doesn't. But if you were to ask any UC fan if that game matters, you know their answer. I don't know about for Ohio State fans, but that exhibition game, we better come out firing because Ohio State, we played them a couple times in our down years. That's honestly, out of all those games, I know it's an exhibition, but that's what I'm most excited to see. And then you talk about losing to Northern Kentucky. Oof. That one we better go in and dominate. That one we have to go in and dominate. But other than that, like you said, it's brutal to start the college basketball year. That's the one thing that college basketball haters have against us.
The great thing about this Niehaus, it takes us all the way into December. We can pretty much sleep, through the first month of the season. Hopefully you sleep into it with an exhibition win. Who would have thunk it? But in this case, an exhibition win and 6 wins against teams you're going to be favored against. There's no doubt. Game 7 is at Villanova. Has yet to be determined, I think, whether it's at the Pavilion, their on-campus arena, where Cincinnati always played them. But the big games, they go to where the Sixers play. So we'll see if that's going to happen there. Then the next game is against Howard in Cincinnati. Thank God we are not going back to Howard's House of Hell, having to suffer through another one of those broadcasts. Although, I'd kind of like to see that broadcast again. I'm sure he's graduated. He's moved on to greener pastures. But that thing, in hindsight, now that Cincinnati won, it was electric. But that was literally Kevin McAllister's house of booby traps in Howard. They wanted to take us down so bad. But we got them December 8th after Villanova. Then it's the crosstown shootout against Xavier. We follow that up against Dayton, and that gets us to Christmas with a game against Grambling State in there that's a freebie, you would think, in Cincinnati. That portion of the schedule: Villanova, Howard, Xavier, Dayton. 3-1 out of that quad, I think you're feeling pretty good. If you're 4-0 at that point, depending on how you look in all these wins, if you've won all these games, Georgia Tech on the road, Villanova on the road, Xavier and Dayton, at that point you're sniffing top 15, top 10.
Yeah, you're looking really good if you can get out of that 4-0. Real quick, that Howard game was one of the most fun and memorable games I think I've ever watched. The broadcast, it was if you can go back and like search YouTube for that, it's worth your time. I mean, somebody find it for me. But anyway, I'm happy with how we end the non-con because those are 3 games. Villanova, obviously the crosstown shootout in Dayton, good tune-ups for Big 12 play. I know that's one big knock people have on Wes is the non-conference schedule. I know that probably bit us last year in terms of March Madness. Those are 3 games. Those are tough games. And once we get to talking about the start of the Big 12 schedule, those 3 games are going to be real good tests heading into January.
No doubt. I'd love to see some sort of an Ohio Classic moving forward because we see that Dayton Xavier back-to-back. I could see, down the road an Ohio State being thrown in there, maybe an Ohio U, maybe a Miami, maybe if you wanted to go Midwest, you could bring in Louisville. Just a nice Midwest holiday tournament. You don't need to go to Nassau. You don't need to go to, the Puerto Rico Jam Classic. You don't need to play on battleships out on the sea. You could just play a nice Midwest game at beautiful U.S. Bank Arena or whatever it's called now. Not quite beautiful. In fact, if you're claustrophobic, I wouldn't go in there for anything that's going to hold over 10K. But after this, Grambling State on December 22nd. UC fans are going to be hopefully undefeated, celebrating Christmas, getting Jizzle James jerseys with Jizzle stitched on the back. And I hope he does that down the road. If we talk to him during media day, we're going to ask him, are you going to pull the Field Williams and, where he put Field on the back? You just going to go Jizzle someday? I mean, it's unique. December 30th, Cincinnati plays at Kansas State to start the Big 12. Weren't great last year, but Tang, they're always sneaky. Then to start the new year, get this gauntlet. Maybe the hardest 3-game stretch in Cincinnati history, and I know we said that a lot last year. This one steps up a notch. It's Arizona, the first team coming to Fifth Third Arena this season in the Big 12. The Wildcats on Saturday, January 4th. Then it's at Baylor. Then it's Kansas at Fifth Third Arena. So the 2 teams, the first 2 Saturdays of January, Arizona's coming to town, and then Kansas is coming to town. If Cincinnati takes care of business in the year 2024, when 2025 flips on the calendar, they are going to have College Game Day for one of those games, Arizona or Kansas. And I don't think we've ever seen College Game Day before, aside from football, and that was insane.
I didn't even think about that. That is a very good point. If you were to come in here and ask me, like, what's the most, and you could ask any Bearcat fan who took 10 seconds looking at the schedule, what's the thing that pops to you? And that's the first 4 games that we're playing in the Big 12. Absolute gauntlet. But I'm going to look at it glass half full because the 2 tougher I mean, obviously, it is hard to tell who's going to be the best team in the Big 12. It's no buys each game, but I'm glad we have Arizona and Kansas at home. I'm going to look at that glass half full. Having those 2 at home out of those 4 is extremely nice starting off Big 12 play. The only negative of that is that we're going to have to watch the Baylor game on TV that has probably the worst camera angle in all of NCAA. I don't know if you remember that last year, but it was a brutal watch. Other than that, great start to Big 12.
2-2 would be what I'm hoping for, which is crazy to say you hope you start Big 12 play 2-2. But, I mean, even if you're winning the 2 road games at Kansas State and at Baylor and losing to Arizona and Kansas, that's still a nice, couple resume wins to pick up, assuming Baylor's as good as they've been in recent years. But that's the first 4. Then it lightens up, so we think. You never know with some of these high-profile teams that are now on the schedule every single day. Feels weird saying that after just a decade of playing the likes of East Carolina, with 700 people there on a Sunday, and the purple wave going crazy as they're drinking Captain Morgan in the crowd. And Tulane the next day, the green wave. Although they did start to improve things towards the near end in both basketball and football, but irrelevant rather. January 15th, Bearcats at Colorado. Then it's Arizona State on January 18th at Fifth Third Arena. First time the Cats have seen Arizona State in God knows how long. I don't know if we've played them in my lifetime, at least since I can remember. But Colorado, Arizona State, Texas Tech at Fifth Third Arena, then it's at BYU where the Cats won last year. That's the next 4-game stanza. Looking at those 4 teams, I think you'd want to go 3-1. I think there's no reason to lose to Texas Tech at home. Take care of business against Arizona State at home, and then split Colorado, BYU. I think 3-1 sounds about right with that tier.
Yeah, I think if you were to have teams that you should beat, there's a couple in here. Arizona State and Colorado, like you said, I don't know if I remember us ever playing Arizona State, but after that gauntlet to start off Big 12 play, like you said, it kind of eases up. It's hard to tell. Obviously, preseason rankings don't mean anything. It's hard to tell right now. I'm looking at this right here in this little stretch in terms of travel. You mentioned BYU, and I'm kind of getting ahead of you, but we have BYU and we have Utah 3 days apart out west. And I would assume that we're going to stay out there, right? You have to. That'd be ridiculous not to. So I think a good draw when it comes to that, because outside of that, and you're not looking at too much travel on this schedule that we're not used to, at least. So that's what I'm mainly looking at in this stretch of the schedule, is that favorable. I'm glad that they did that for us in terms of BYU and Utah.
Yeah, and the NCAA knows what they're doing. Come on, they don't make mistakes here. They rectify all their mistakes. The Baylor or the BYU game rather in Provo is on Saturday, and then the Utah game's on Tuesday. So that works out perfectly, right? They'll miss 1 day, 2 days of classes. They'll survive. Smart kids. They'll make up for it. Wes is tutoring them on the team bus.
Yeah.
He's saying, guys, who could tell me the Pythagorean theorem? So that's to end January. BYU and Utah back-to-back. Then to start February, maybe the most favorable 2-game stretch of the season, assuming one of these 2 teams isn't better than I am predicting. That would be West Virginia at home and then UCF on the road. No reason you can't go 2-0 and at that point be, 7-3 or 6-4, whatever it is in the conference, looking like a tournament lock. It's BYU and Utah again, that same 2-game slate, this time in Cincinnati. So Cincinnati and Utah all of a sudden is going to have a rivalry this season. If any Utes and Cougars are watching, get them up, baby. There's going to be a rivalry. Actually, the next game at Iowa State on February 15th, that is the rivalry, Niehaus. I'm stating it right now. Iowa State fans, they're great. They're great. Professional trolls, and there's droves of them out there. But what the hell has Iowa State ever accomplished? You've done nothing. Nothing. That stretch right there with the Utah teams, West Virginia, UCF, that's probably the easiest slate. I mean, at some point, it's got to ease up after the 4-game gauntlet we started with.
Yeah, I looked at the whole Utah, playing them back-to-back on the road, playing them back-to-back at home, hoping that we get out of that 4-game stretch with just those 2 teams, thinking, man, I wish we could play these teams every single night and not, oh my goodness, thank goodness we're over with these Utah teams. So that's what I think about there. You mentioned Iowa State. I wrote down here that outside of the Saturday games with Arizona and Kansas, everybody's going to say that those are going to be the most anticipated games. Outside of those 2, Iowa State's the number 1 game I'm looking forward to the most, because we lost a ton of games last year by 1 or 2 possessions. Ball could have gone either way. We could have won a lot. Iowa State dominated us last year. I remember I was at that game, and you see some positives and even any loss and all that, but Iowa State, I don't know if the score was that bad, but it looked like we could barely get the ball.
It was bad, and Houdini would say we got ragdolled.
Oh my goodness, we could barely get the ball past half court. That is one thing. If we can go into Iowa State on the road and take them down, I'll forgive Wes for the miserable game we had against them last year.
After the road trip to Ames, it's West Virginia in Morgantown on a hump day. It's always fun. You won't be going to work on Thursday. I promise you. Try going up to Morgantown for a one-night trip after a Bearcats win and tell me you're going to make it back for work on Thursday. That's not happening. Just get the hotel. Just stay in Morgantown. Anyway, Saturday, February 22nd, it's TCU. Then it's Baylor at Fifth Third Arena on a Tuesday. Then to start off March, it's at Houston. Only time the Cats play Houston this year. Kansas State at home and at Oklahoma State. So Cincinnati gets a lot of Utah. They get both the Utah schools twice. They get Baylor twice. They get Kansas State twice. And they get West Virginia twice. It's pretty favorable to me, man.
Yeah, with 20, because they moved from 18 to 20 games this year. So it's
I was going to say, I'm going down this list, and I'm like, good God, this is a gauntlet. It doesn't end.
Yeah.
We're going to be all bruised and battered by the time we're talking madness.
The teams we play twice, again, you have to take this with a grain of salt in terms of all of these teams are good. Even the teams that were like, okay, that's favorable, whatever, they're still good. I don't know if there's – I mean, Hurley is on the hot seat, right? I didn't miss anything, right? I mean, with Arizona State, that's got to be the number one team that, like, you look at and you're like, all right, we need to win this game. But there's no other game where you're walking in feeling really good just because of how you played last week. At least, of course, now, again, it's September. We don't know. Some of these teams could get injured. Some of these teams could be a total train wreck.
I hope the conversation is in like 2 months. I can't believe we said that about, having no winnable games on the schedule or every game is going to be a dogfight. Like, we're better than a lot of these teams. I would hope that's the case. And obviously it's a loaded schedule, but like West Virginia, UCF, I don't know about Utah. I do think they're going to be solid this year. BYU.
We got the Madsen brothers.
That's going to be fun coming back to town. TCU, Oklahoma State. Like, there are teams on the schedule that I hope with the team that Wes has constructed. Like, I'm very emotional when it comes to the Bearcats, and I get very high, I get very low. It's tough to stay even-keeled with this program. Like, I can stay unbiased with other sports teams that I cover, but the fan of this team, it comes out in me. It's the best Bearcats team we've seen in 15-plus years. I truly believe that. Jizzle James, I think, is a star, a steal that he's in Cincinnati right now. I think after this season, he's going to be entertaining the professional levels. I think he's going to be all-conference, second team, that type of player this year. Dan Skillings is right up in that realm. Bandego can throw down and block with the best of them. He gives you something. Dylan Mitchell gives you a lot of something. He gives you athleticism. He gives you a big wing. Can't really stretch the floor with his shooting, but can put it on the deck. High flyer, elite defender, elite rebounder, an elite offensive rebounder, which is what this team did so well last year. Day Thomas, if he's your backup point guard, you feel really good about that backup point guard position. You add in Arrington Page, who Wes Miller plucked from USC and says is going to be a integral part of this season and the future for Cincinnati. So he's a big believer in him and believes that it was misusage and injuries last year that got to Page. Maybe some mono. That'll get you. And then, I mean, the list goes on and on. You got Connor Hickman. You got CJ Frederick, two shooters that you can plug in there. I'm missing guys. That's how deep this team is.
Yeah.
And probably missing guys that are going to play a significant role this season. Rayvon Griffith. Like, we've heard rumblings of him being a big-time contributor this offseason to where he could step in. I'm probably missing guys, Niehaus. Like, that's how confident I am that this team is going to be top 15 in the country for the majority of this year. And, 2-3 seed material come tournament time. Call me insane.
So many good players. I don't know if you missed guys. Did you say Seamus Lukosha? You said Seamus, right?
I mean, didn't even say Seamus, dude. Like, I didn't.
He
even
might
say
be our
Seamus,
best player.
who put up like 40 points Like
Yeah.
2 games in a row, 37 last year. Maybe our best player. I didn't even name him. Point.
You can have an argument for 3 guys for sure being our best player between Jizzle, Skillings, and Seamus. For sure.
And I think
deep.
it's safe to say, based off what he did last year at Texas, Dylan Mitchell gets in that conversation as well. So we're talking 4.
Well, and back to the schedule, you mentioned the teams we play twice. You know what? And again, this bias, like you said, get emotional about the Bearcats. Better than West Virginia. BYU loses their head coach to Kentucky. I know that the coach that came into BYU did a really good job of not making it a dumpster fire this year. So BYU BYU TBD, but I would say we're better than them. I would say if the Madsen brothers, I love them. I mean, very, very good kids. You know, they're just kids and good players, but I would take our guys against, I mean, if they're seeing heavy minutes on Utah, give me UC against Utah. We have a chance, like you said, of being a high seed in the NCAA tournament. This is the team. They're deep, and I know with the transfer portal you can reload like crazy, but Skilling said he's going to leave. Jizzle could possibly, if he blows up, go entertain the pros. This has got to be the year that we at least get to the NCAA tournament. I mean, if we don't do that, it's absolute disaster. But the Bearcats are good. Like you said, this is definitely the best team we've had in a long time.
I think on paper, and I've came on the show plenty of times and had gripes with Wes Miller, and I would love to see a lot more wins. But from what he's done from an on-paper standpoint this offseason, the team that he's put together on paper, like it's an A+. It's an A+. It's the most excited I've been about a team in maybe, since the second, third grade. A team with like Max Eel and some of those guys that ended up being like a 6 seed or a 5 seed that got dismantled by Illinois. It's been since then because the Kilpatrick years, the Sweet 16 team. The Sweet 16 team, let's not forget, they were a 5 or a 6 seed. And then the team with Kilpatrick, even though they won a whole bunch of games, they lost to Harvard when we were, I think, a 4. I don't even think we were a 3. And then the Gary Clark year, like that team was pretty damn good, right? They weren't missing much. But star power alone on this year's team. I mean, Gary Clark got some NBA time. Troy Copain wasn't even on that team, so that's erroneous. But, I mean, if we're talking NBA guys, like Dylan Mitchell is being talked about in that echelon. Like if he comes in and balls out, like he could be an NBA guy after this year. I think Jizzle has the makings of being just a star. Seamus is a really good scorer. If he can get slightly better defensively, I like what we have there. And so there's no excuses is what I'm getting at. Long story short, if West can't win games this year, barring like injuries or something we can point to and say, let's run it back, this guy's too good a recruiter. If he can't win with this team, it's probably the oldest team in America. I mean, we got like 3 25-year-olds on this team, it feels like. I don't think I'm wrong saying that. I would have to look up some of the ages. So I'll look up the ages as you kind of get your point here. But we're old, We're seasoned, we're talented, we're deep at every position, we're long. We don't have a clear weakness aside from maybe shooting. We'll see if that comes into play, as always. But as of right now, not many clear weaknesses. Like there aren't excuses. It's go time for Wes. Wes, go.
Well, yeah, I mean, the only team that I would say right now on paper that can compete with this team is the 2018 team with Gary Clark. But what's cool about this is that this team is good in so many different ways than that 2018 team was. I mean, obviously with Mick, you got to love Bearcat toughness, grind it out, defense, score 50 points a game. Isn't that the best? But this team, like you said, shooting, they've got, Connor Hickman and CJ Frederick. We're forgetting about Frederick. He's the one who makes the team old for sure, but is Frederick like the 10th guy? And when we got him, he was supposed to be our best shooter, and now he's somebody who's going to come off the bench and be able to just shoot and not be the focal point and not – because sometimes the best shooters obviously attract a lot of defensive attention, but there's just too many guys to guard offensively for the Bearcats for them to really focus on CJ Frederick. And he can come in and, get him a couple open looks. There's our shooting. And Connor Hickman, 1-2 punch with Connor Hickman and CJ Frederick, if they are on the same, or if they are on the floor together, I think that'll be awesome. It's too good of a team to not meet expectations this year.
I don't think we're going to see those two on the floor together at the same time, personally. Even though Hickman is pretty athletic from all things considered, I just don't think with all the length and athletes we have, you stick those two on the floor ever at the same time, except maybe late in the game for free throw type situations. But, man, I'm just looking all the way through this thing. There is – I'm going to slow my roll a little bit here as an emotional Bearcats fan, like I said. Last year, there were a couple big issues. Issue number one, the sloppy play. I made them extra sloppy for you, the turnovers. It was so bad and undisciplined at times. Let's not forget about the missed layups. Are we going to fix that problem? I don't care how many offensive rebounds we have with Dylan Mitchell. If we can't, there's a lid on the bucket, like there is seemingly every year, and especially last season. That's not going to fix our issues. And then just the ability to close teams out. We'd go up 10, we'd go up 12. There was no adult on the floor, I guess you could say. Like, who was our leader last year? Am I missing someone? Like, who was our guy that came in the huddle? Our Sean Kilpatrick, our guy that's going to have his jerseys in the rafters someday if Mick gets his way. Like, who is that guy for this Cincinnati Bearcats team? We didn't have him last year. Who's going to turn into that person this season? Could it be a sophomore Jizzle James with that Hall of Fame pedigree? Could it be Seamas? Dan takes over that role. Like that's what I'm looking forward to entering this season. That's a storyline.
Well, we didn't have that guy the whole year, but
Newman.
We got that guy in the NIT.
Newman. We had Newman. We did have Newman.
Newman was a dog. Credit. Newman was a dog. We had that guy in the NIT with Jizzle James, and that happened once Wes played him more. So there is no reason not to think that Jizzle's not going to be that guy going forward. And Seamus had a couple huge shots down the stretch. Look, my memory's not that great. I'd have to look up the tape to remember exactly which games he took over at the end. But Seamus and Jizzle were those two down the stretch at the end of the year. I know you mentioned sloppy play. There's one culprit for that last year as a sophomore, and Dan Skillings. It was no, yes a lot of times with him. One more year under the belt, he's going to probably be he would have to be more disciplined this year. I mean, he had that role at the beginning of the year of being our go-to guy offensively, and sometimes that would, he was just a sophomore. He was just a sophomore. So sometimes it would get sloppy. But I thought he was so good that it was excusable. One more year as a junior, he looks stronger. I mean, some of the pictures you see in the offseason in the Monster Factory, he looks like he's going to be way, way stronger with the ball. And I think that sloppy play is going to be cleaned up with him, especially this year. So, again, like the negatives of last year, it seems like they should be solved.
I got these splits up for you. Jizzle was putting up 20 a night, come NIT play, 18 to 20 consistently. But Seamas towards the end of the year had double figures in 9 of his final 10 games and had a 31-point outburst against West Virginia, scored 28 against San Francisco in the NIT. Jizzle was great that game too, and then went for 26 at Indiana State. And I didn't even mention him as someone that's on the team this season, just because I was running through all the names and I was thinking, and I didn't say his name, and literally averaged like 22 points the last 8 games of the season. So, yeah, I'm excited. And yes, I have lofty expectations. 3-2 seed, call me insane. I don't care. I am insane and proud of it. Bearcats and Texas Tech Red Raiders this weekend Unless, obviously, this dates itself and you're listening to it down the road, then it may not be this weekend. Hopefully, Cincinnati is 4-1 after that game. We got the post-game shows always on Chatterbox Bearcats. This is content around the clock for UC Athletics, or at least the basketball team and the football team. The rest, TBD. But 2 programs right now that are hopefully on the rise. And hopefully the show is as well. The best way to make it rise, like, subscribe, share it with a friend, and just join us and comment on the YouTube section. Appreciate it, everyone. See you, Nick.